I worked as a night custodian at an old high school, the kind built in the 1940s, all brick and echoes. I liked the quiet shifts. The silence felt honest. During the day the students filled every hallway with noise, but at night the building finally exhaled. Except for the auditorium. Even before I'd ever cleaned it, people whispered things about that room. They said the stage lights flickered on their own, that you could hear footsteps in the seats when you were locking up. The drama teacher, Mrs. Rhodes, once joked, "If you hear applause after midnight, don't take a bow." I used to laugh, until I had to clean it alone. That night was cold. The snow outside muffled everything. The halls smelled faintly of bleach and dust. When I pushed my cleaning cart toward the auditorium doors, one wheel squeaked in a rhythm that sounded like breathing. The second I unlocked the side door, the air changed, thicker, colder, and still carrying that faint scent of velvet and wood polish. I flipped the light switch. Only half of the chandeliers came on, leaving the upper balcony swallowed in shadow. The rest of the room stretched out in front of me, endless rows of folding chairs, all facing the stage, all waiting. The first 10 minutes were easy. Sweep the aisles, dust the seats, keep your eyes down. I hummed to myself to fill the space. My voice came back to me from somewhere above, warped, delayed, like the auditorium didn't want to give it back. Then I heard something. A soft thump. From the stage. I froze mid-step. My broom handle hovered in the air. The sound had weight, like someone's foot shifting carefully on wood. The kind of sound people make when they think you won't notice. I told myself it was the curtain rope. Or maybe the draft. Anything that meant I could stay in the comfort of pretending. But the air wasn't still anymore. It moved, a cold drift across my neck, the kind that feels like breath you didn't expect. "Hello?" My voice broke before the word finished. Nothing answered. I turned the broom around like a weapon and started sweeping again. The dust clung to my shoes and every sweep echoed too long. My heartbeat matched the rhythm of the squeaky wheel on my cart. I just wanted to finish and leave. That's when the whisper came. It wasn't a word, not yet, just the sound of someone forming one. A faint, deliberate inhale as if the air itself had lungs. I stopped moving. The whisper slid through the seats, low and almost kind, circling me like it was testing how close it could get before I'd notice. I aimed my flashlight toward the stage. The beam hit the red curtain, glowing like blood under skin. Everything behind it was a wall of shadow. I climbed the steps, each one creaking as if warning me back. The whisper faded. Then from the upper balcony something else answered, a soft, slow shuffle. I looked up and for a second I saw it. A dark outline sitting in the front row of the balcony, motionless but there. Shoulders hunched, head tilted just slightly as if watching me. The flashlight shook in my hands, its circle of light dancing uselessly. When I blinked the shape was gone. Silence. Then a breath, this time right beside my ear. My name, whispered like a secret someone didn't want to share. Eli? I spun so fast I dropped the flashlight. It rolled across the stage, beams spinning wildly over ropes, sandbags, old props. For one horrifying second, it illuminated a face, pale, half-formed, like dust suspended in air. Then darkness swallowed it again. My hands trembled so badly I could barely pick up the light. The whisper came again, closer now, directly behind the curtain. I could hear the fabric move, the faint swish of something brushing against it from the other side. Without thinking, I grabbed the curtain and yanked it open. Nothing. Just the empty backstage. The ropes swayed as if something had passed between them a moment ago. The silence that followed felt alive, thick and waiting, like it wanted me to breathe so it could answer back. Then the footsteps started. Not running. Not even walking. Just a slow, deliberate pacing across the balcony. 1 step, 2, 3, stop. The weight of each step echoed through the room. My body locked up. The sound came again, moving from one side of the balcony to the other, as if whoever, whatever, was up there was deciding where to sit. I ran. I didn't even think. My flashlight beam jittered across the seats as I bolted down the aisle. The sound of my footsteps blended with the ones above, the rhythm almost mocking mine. When I reached the door, the handle was ice cold, colder than metal should be. I yanked it open, stumbled into the hallway, and slammed it shut behind me. My breath came in shallow bursts. The air out there felt thin but human. Real. Behind the door, faintly, tap, tap, tap. like fingers drumming against the wood. Slow, patient, almost playful. The next morning, I told another custodian what happened. He laughed the way people do when they want your fear to sound like a joke. Then he told me the story everyone at the school knew but never said aloud. Years ago, a drama teacher had collapsed on that stage during rehearsal. Heart attack. He died before the students could even leave their seats. They say he loved that auditorium more than anything, that he used to stay late rehearsing alone. After that night, I refused to clean that room. I'd trade shifts, invent reasons, anything to stay out of there. But sometimes, when the building was quiet, I could still hear faint applause, slow, measured, like someone clapping once every few seconds from somewhere far away. The principal once said, "Funny, those lights on the stage sometimes turn themselves on around midnight." I didn't laugh. I already knew why. Even now, years later, when I walk past any theater or old hall and feel a cold breath brush the back of my neck, I remember that whisper, my name said softly like it belonged to him. Maybe it does. I used to think night shifts were easy money, no students, no noise, no one watching. The middle school had its own rhythm after dark. The hum of old lights, the faint buzz of vending machines, and the distant tick of the hallway clocks echoing through the empty halls. But the basement? That place never followed any rhythm. It had its own pulse. The school was built in the 1950s and its basement looked every bit its age. Cracked walls, rusted pipes, and a sour, wet smell that clung to your clothes. The fluorescent lights there flickered weakly, and when they died, they stayed dead for days. The older janitors always joked, "Avoid the basement if you can, it doesn't like visitors." I thought it was just an old man's attempt at humor. Until the night I had to go down there alone. There was a school event the next morning, and I was told to bring up a stack of folding chairs, the ones stored in the basement's second room on the left. I remember standing by the heavy steel door, key in hand, telling myself it was just another errand. The air was still, almost waiting. When I finally opened the door, the metal hinges screamed like something being woken up. Each step down the stairs echoed too loudly. I could hear the soles of my boots like they didn't belong to me. When I reached the bottom, I flipped the light switch. Only 2 lights came on, buzzing like dying insects. Shadows leaned against the walls, and I felt something cold brush across my face. There was no wind, no windows, but it felt like a breath. The second door was half rusted and screamed when I pulled it open. Inside were stacks of dusty folding chairs, leaning crooked against the wall. I bent down to lift a few when something faint but sharp broke the silence. A dragging sound like a shoe sliding across concrete. I froze, chairs in hand, heart racing. I told myself it was just pipes or rats. That's what you do down there, you explain things before they can explain you. I carried the chairs out to the stairwell, stacking them neatly before heading back for another load. The second I stepped back into the room, something felt off. The chairs weren't how I'd left them. The stack had shifted, slightly but enough that I noticed. One chair was now leaning the opposite way. I frowned and whispered to myself, "They just slid. You're imagining things." But my voice didn't sound right down there. It came back to me distorted, like it passed through someone else's mouth. Then I heard it again. That dragging. But this time closer, slower, deliberate. I turned the flashlight toward the sound, my hand trembling. About 20 feet away, a classroom door that should have been closed tight was now cracked open. The beam of my light trembled on it as my throat dried. Every rule in my body said don't move, but curiosity is a disease when you're scared. "Hello?" I called out. My voice barely existed. No answer. I took one cautious step, then another. The floor creaked beneath me like it was complaining. I reached the cracked door and pushed it open, fast. My light swept across shelves, boxes, dust, and old science equipment. No one. Nothing. And then behind me, that dragging sound again, faster this time, followed by the dull thump of something heavy brushing the floor. I spun around, my flashlight beam slicing through the hall, but it caught only the shimmer of dust. Still, I could feel something standing just beyond the light. Watching. Waiting. The air grew heavy, almost wet, pressing against my chest. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. I took a slow step back toward the stairs, the sound of my boots now swallowed by something thicker than silence. I don't remember deciding to run. My legs just did it for me. When I reached the bottom of the stairwell, I grabbed the chairs I'd left and bolted up, 2 steps at a time, breath tearing at my throat. Behind me, somewhere deep in that basement, something shuffled again. Not chasing. Just moving like it was following a routine I'd interrupted. I slammed the door shut, locked it, and leaned against it, gasping. The hallway above felt too quiet, like the building was listening. I didn't go back down that night. I told myself I'd finish the job in the morning. But the next night proved that whatever was down there wasn't finished with me. A week later, I was mopping the hallway directly above the basement door when I heard it, 3 sharp bangs against the wall below. Even heavy, deliberate. My hands froze on the mop handle. Then came the rattle. The doorknob below shook like something was testing it, not violently but with patience. Tap, 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 like knuckles on metal. The air around me turned cold. The mop slid from my hand, clattering across the floor, but I couldn't move. I just stared at that door, waiting for it to open. It never did. After that night, I refused to go down alone. When the others asked why, I laughed it off, told them I was superstitious or maybe just tired. But every time I passed that door, the metal handle seemed slightly turned, like it remembered me. Years later, I still see it in dreams, that flickering hallway, the dragging footsteps, the breath that didn't belong to me. I wake up sweating with the same thought repeating in my head. What if, that night when I first opened the door, something else opened too? I worked as a custodian at a high school for 3 years, long corridors, squeaky lockers, and that smell of old polish that never really left your clothes. Most nights were routine. Mop the halls, empty trash, turn off lights, and pretend the building wasn't whispering to itself. But the 3rd floor, that place was different. It had classrooms no one used anymore, locked doors, dusty desks, and a strange silence that felt heavier than air. Even the other janitors avoided it if they could. They said, "That floor doesn't like being alone." I laughed until the night I had to clean it by myself. It was a Friday, almost midnight. The school felt like a museum that had forgotten it was closed. Every footstep echoed back at me, slightly delayed, like someone was a step behind. I started my routine, sweeping, wiping down the lockers, shutting the lights room by room. When I passed the storage classroom halfway down the hall, the door was open. That didn't make sense. I had locked that door myself earlier. The rule was simple: lock everything before moving on. I froze, hands still on the mop handle, staring at that open doorway. The light from the hallway barely reached inside. I told myself it was nothing, a loose latch, maybe air pressure. But deep down, something old and instinctive whispered, that door didn't open by itself. I forced myself to check it anyway. I pushed it open slowly, flashlight in hand. The room was empty, just stacked desks, boxes, and a smell of paper rot. I checked the windows, all locked tight. Nothing out of place. I almost convinced myself it was fine, until I saw the marks on the floor. Long scuff lines. Something had been dragged. One of the heavy boxes near the back wall shifted out of alignment. I felt a prickling at the base of my skull, that crawling warmth your body sends before it runs. Still, I closed the door, double-locked it, and went back to cleaning. But my heartbeat didn't slow. Every few minutes I'd look down the hallway and swear I saw the faint reflection of movement in the door's glass window. By the time I reached the stairwell, I'd finally calmed down, until I turned to glance back one last time. The door was wide open. Not cracked. Not ajar. Wide open. I stopped breathing. My mop clattered to the tiles. For a full 10 seconds I just stared, trying to understand how. The hallway stretched silent except for the faint hum of old lights. I whispered, "Hello?" No answer. The open classroom was a dark mouth waiting. I took a step closer, the sound of my boots unnaturally loud. "Is someone in there?" My voice didn't sound like mine. It came out small, scared. I reached the door and looked inside. The box that had been near the wall was now in the middle of the floor, perfectly centered. And then I heard it, slow, ragged breathing. From the back of the room. Not the creak of pipes. Not the hiss of the vents. Real human breathing. I froze. It was deep and heavy, like someone trying to stay quiet but wanting me to hear. The beam of my flashlight trembled across the room. "Who's there?" I whispered again, weaker this time. No movement. Just that steady sound, inhale, exhale, wet and uneven. My throat burned. My chest tightened. I turned and bolted. Down the hallway, through the stairwell door, heart slamming against my ribs. I called my supervisor from the bottom floor, stammering about what I'd heard. He told me to calm down, said he'd be there in 20 minutes. Those 20 minutes felt like hours. I stayed in the lobby, every light on, staring at the stairwell. Once I thought I saw a shadow move behind the glass, just the faintest shift. I told myself I was imagining it. When he arrived, we went back up together. His flashlight beam cut across the floor as if nothing had ever happened. The box was still in the middle of the room. We searched closets, behind desks, under tables. Nothing. He laughed and said I needed sleep. I didn't argue, but I kept thinking about that breathing. How close it had sounded. How deliberate it was, like something alive that wanted me to notice. After that night, I refused to clean that floor alone. I didn't tell the others what really happened, just said the hallway made me uneasy. They laughed like people do when they're scared to agree. Weeks later, another custodian told me a story. Years ago, a student had been caught hiding overnight in that same classroom. Tried to scare his friends, they said. But something went wrong, a seizure maybe, and by morning he was found dead near that same box I'd seen. They never used the room again. Just sealed it, turned off the lights, and let it rot. The next time I had the night shift, I avoided the third floor completely. Still, every now and then when I mopped the second floor, I'd hear a faint hollow breathing through the ceiling tiles, slow, steady waiting. I quit that job a few months later, but even now, when a door opens behind me and no one's there, I feel the same chill on the back of my neck. The kind that says, it's still up there watching, breathing in the dark. The darkness is always watching. If you want more stories that send chills down your spine, like, share and subscribe to Dark Echoes. Stay safe or don't. We'll see you next time.